I thought the tears would never stop.
Challenges. There's no denying we all have them. These are the stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and emerging better on the other side. I'm Cheryl Hunter. As a teenager, I was kidnapped and held captive. Today, my mission is to let you know that you are bigger than anything that can ever come your way. Join us for these extraordinary stories and be reminded that your true nature is to rise. This is Nancy Irwin, sharing her own story and the remarkable way that she's gone on to pay it forward. You have a very unconventional approach to solving a conventional problem.
Yes, some would say that, yes. Yeah, my background is, as a teenager, I was molested by a man of the cloth, a Presbyterian minister. And this occurred over the course of about 4 or 5 years, at a time that no one talked about these things.
What was your world like at the time?
Well, I grew up in an upper middle class, very proper Southern family. I'm originally from Atlanta. And there were a lot of rules, what you, good little Southern belle, could talk about and what she couldn't. And you weren't allowed to talk about sex until you got married and had babies. I never could figure that one out. So I knew it was wrong, yet like a lot of victims, part of me enjoyed it. Because I didn't understand it at the time, of course. It was extraordinarily confusing, but I felt special. And that duality that a lot of victims of sexual abuse experience and usually are afraid to talk about, and God knows I was for years. I covered it up with rage and anger and all sorts of other things. And humor, of course, deflecting it all. But when I was able to finally just address it and see it for what it was, then I was able to break apart those underpinnings and find some relief and be able to embrace men as human beings instead of damning each and every one of them to hell, which is what I did for years, frankly.
Did you have anyone to whom you could turn at that time?
No. First of all, I was told not to tell. He was a friend of the family, and he was a very powerful figure and very charismatic. No one would have believed me. And he really had it cloaked well because he actually taught the kids in our church sex education. None of the parents wanted to talk about that with their kids, so here he comes wanting to give them proper sexual education. So all the parents were, great, we don't want to have to talk about this. And I always counsel parents now, if you don't talk to your kids about sex, you better believe there's someone else out there who will, and you may not like what they're saying. So he imparted a lot of very sexist information, to say the least, and so good girls were supposed to wait. Yet on the other hand, here he was molesting me on the summer camp trips and the weekend retreats to the Presbyterian Center. So what was I supposed to do with that? 13, 14, 15, 16. And he continued writing me letters well on after he left our church. When I was in college, he sort of followed me. I wouldn't say stalking me, but it was kind of eerie how he knew things about me. And he would write me these letters. They're very pornographic and clearly a man who lived in a fantasy world. He was married, and, all sorts of fantasies that he spun that were, to say the least, confusing and drove a huge wedge into my ability to be truly intimate with boys, with men. He always wanted to know what I was doing on dates with boys, and that was the time I was starting to date. So I felt shamed, yet titillated, and that was all reflected back in him. So it was years of laughing to cover it all up. I didn't tell anyone. There was one older woman that I was very close to who was a fan of my music. I was a trained opera singer, and she loved my voice and followed me along. And I remember trying to tell her about it because she knew him, and she didn't want to hear it. She shut me down. And I actually felt closer to her than my own parents. And that happened, and I thought, well, I ain't telling nobody. And didn't for a long, long time.
A lot of times victims blame themselves.
Oh, God, yeah.
Is that something you did?
Oh, God, yeah. And I bought into half of the message he was dispensing was I was a bad girl because here I was interested in sex.
What was your darkest moment?
I guess there were many. I guess You know, even when you're being molested and you know it's wrong, yet you're enjoying it, and then there's a sense of abandonment that happens the next day when you see him talking to other girls. And that was just beyond confusing and abandoning. Not that I really thought there was, well, I guess I did think there was an intimate bond, and there was in a sense. But then I saw that maybe he was choosing someone else and I wasn't the favored one anymore. There was a lot of dark moments like that, actually.
What was the turning point then for you?
To really start dealing with this, it's actually quite a dramatic one. I was living in New York, and I went to a Broadway show that was a hot ticket at the time. It was called Burn This, starring John Malkovich. And I have no idea if the play was really good because I had to get up in the middle of it when something John Malkovich said was exactly what this man had written in all his letters to me, spinning these sexual fantasies, talking about all this stuff. He would always sign it, P.S. Burn this. No one else will understand what we have. So when I heard something similar like that into the play, sorry John Malkovich, with just the burn this, all of a sudden these memories started redacting. They just absolutely started coming up. I had to fly out of that theater. I remember I ran out and I vomited in the middle of Broadway. And I don't even know what I did for the next day. It was just really surreal. I was sort of in shock. I have no idea if I took a cab or the subway back home. But I just called a friend who knew of a shrink, and I went there and just started going, what's happening to me? I'm losing my mind. And we started sorting things out. And I probably buried it for a few years. By that point, I was a stand-up comic, and it was easy to make jokes out of this, you know, and really bury it. And in a way, that was a healthy sublimation of all of this. But then it catches up to you at some point. It absolutely does. So when I was working out here as a comic, and when you're a comic, you only work about 30 minutes a day, so I was bored, and I started volunteering at the center for a charity called Children of the Night. It's a shelter for sexually abused teenagers, and I absolutely fell in love with it. It waked up the healer in me. I didn't really consciously know why I chose this shelter to volunteer, but obviously unconsciously it was calling to me. I thought I just liked the name and it was convenient to my home. Children of the Night, and I just loved the name, and I just remember the first girl I looked at there. I certainly won't say her name, but I just remember looking in those enormous brown eyes of hers. She was 11 years old and told me her story of her abuse, and I thought the tears would never stop, and something moved in me that's moving me right now. And I thought, oh my God, I would never say to her the things I've said to myself. And that's what started it. And I just thought, there's something more for me to do. There's kids who are, impregnated by God knows who, and strung out, and just really dissociated and traumatized. Way more dramatic stories than mine. There's got to be something. I was led here for some reason. So I went back to school. It took me 5 years to complete it, and I learned this formula, if you will, a way out of hell. And that's essentially not to run from the fear, but to look it straight in the eyes. And I thought, as I was studying all of this material about molesters and victims, I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to face the abusers. I confronted my own, I should say, which was extraordinarily powerful. But then, truly, this work, being able to develop compassion for people who are also traumatized too. Not defending their behavior, but certainly defending their desire to change, as many more of them have than is purported. And that has been extraordinarily thrilling to make a difference in their lives, in my own. And my mission is now, I hope, to eradicate child abuse and have the awareness and the treatment so powerful, not just by myself, of course, with all my colleagues and associates. There's many organizations I'm a member of who have the same mission. And we're all committed to, putting out the word that treatment does work and letting people know there is a place to go. So for victims as well as the abusers.
Nancy, how did you finally confront your own abuser?
So I dug up his number like a good little sleuth. I found it and called him. Of course, he denied everything, as a part of me was prepared that he would. And through the course of the discussion, he came around and said, well, I never did it to anybody else. And I said, oh, that stuff you never did to me? Oh, okay, right. And then he pulled again the same thing. Well, can you call me next Tuesday? My wife's going to be out of town that day. And I just said, I think I have everything I need. I just wanted to speak my piece. And God bless him, he did listen. He let me say my piece. And he did finally apologize. And then I hung up the phone, and this woman was standing near me who heard the whole thing and just grabbed me in this huge bear hug. And I'm so glad she was there. I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have passed out. But again, I went and vomited. Again, I think I was in shock, and I couldn't even tell you what I did the rest of the day. My ears were ringing. I was just like, it felt, not being overly dramatic, but it did. It felt like something had been righted in me. Like this glacial shift, this tectonic shift occurred in my psyche, and I'm sure it did. This was 30, 35 years that all of a sudden I got to have my say and call him on his lie. And that was that. I didn't need to talk to him anymore. Didn't need to see him face to face, no desire to. And then through the course of my studies, I started meeting these guys, and I say guys because I haven't treated any females yet, but they're out there. But I was clear to open that channel. The beginning, it was difficult. There was like two me's. One was dissociated, angry, spinning around, judging, and the other was clinician, yes sir, and then at some point, very quickly actually, because I was so committed to recovery for myself and healing, that I was able to be in one body and fully focused and treat him like a human being and see the behavior as unacceptable without shaming the person, which is the only way one can heal.
What would you say to someone who has suffered abuse and isn't clear how to recover?
I think it's much easier now since this issue is on the front page of every newspaper right now, thank God. It used to be swept under the carpet. Well, we've picked up the carpet in our culture now, and the filth is flying out. So I think it's much easier. Intervention is much more accessible now. There was no intervention back then. I tried to tell one person and I was shut down. Now it's much easier. Nurses, counselors, principals, everyone is trained. Forget therapists and parents, but all those people, so if a kid is abused at church or at school, they know now. They're trained where to go to tell their story, and intervention is immediate, which is the key to healing anything, of course. So it's definitely much easier now, but I would encourage people, of course, say something. There may be blind alleys. Some people may not want to hear it. They may be projecting their own issues, and that's why they can't hear it. But find someone who will, because I promise you there's someone out there who will hear you and take care of you. You do not have to suffer alone.
What would you say to someone who's been abused or victimized who wants to speak to their abuser but doesn't have the same result that you had?
Well, you want to prepare for it, and there's a wonderful technique called restorative therapy, where it's done with a therapist, and you have an abuser. It could be the abuser, it could be a mock one, somebody who's in a group to heal, who's admitted they've molested children and they want to stop. And you have that and a victim, and it's extraordinary, where they both get to tell their story. And it's more freeing for the victim than it is the abuser, because they stand there and they have to take it. You cannot challenge, and it's moderated by a trained professional, and each one gets to have their say. And that's incredibly empowering. So I would suggest someone, if they're not ready one-on-one, then definitely seek out someone who is a professional who uses restorative therapy or can learn it very quickly. What I've just told you, it can be done. Any therapist who's willing to do that can do that.
What difference has it made that you've gone through the abuse you have? How has it changed you for the better?
I really believe that you can turn your pain into your purpose. And it's continual management. Believe me, it still comes up every once in a while. I haven't mastered this and probably never will. I'm not justifying it at all. So I hope people hear me carefully. But I do think that whatever happens to us happens for us. And I could not do the work I'm doing now had I not gone through that.
If she were here, what would you say to your 13, 14, 15-year-old?
Oh my God, I've done this tremendously, and I keep a picture of her by me. So I actually do check in with her daily. And I just keep giving her all the love she needs and reminding her that someone does care, that there is a place to put that pain, and that she's hardly alone.
Anything else you'd like to tell us, Nancy?
To just keep staying on your path and follow your heart and find your way out of your pain.
Because it is possible. You've really displayed that. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And sharing yourself and your story and your heart.
One other thing I'd like to quote one of my favorite spiritual leaders. He says, it's Dr. Michael Beckwith. He says, don't run from fear. Turn around and kiss it on the lips. I think that says it all.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Nancy's relationship to fear is a particularly empowering one. She reminds us to not run from fear, but rather look it straight in the eyes.